Thank you. I am pleased to formally introduce Madeline McClure, who is the director of the Texas Association for the Protection of Children. She serves as the appointee of Lieutenant Governor David Dewhurst and Texas House Speaker Joe Straus on the Texas Blue Ribbon Task Force on Child Abuse, Prevention, and Child Welfare, and she's the chair of the Child Protection Roundtable, which she founded. She has a career of about a decade making money successfully on Wall Street before she turned to making lives better for children on Texas streets. She also works as a therapist now or has worked as a therapist with the Dallas Children's Advocacy Center. I believe she's done much to help prevent abuse and neglect in Texas, more than anyone I know, and is a tireless advocate who made this special trip from Dallas to be here today. Thank you, Madeline, for coming to join us and for all you're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Doggett. Ms. McClure, you may proceed.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Ranking Member Doggett and Chair Paulson and committee members. Thank you so much for inviting me to testify today on this most critical issue of child maltreatment fatalities. I'm honored to be here. Well, given that child maltreatment deaths stem primarily from child physical abuse and child neglect, I'm going to focus my comments today on child maltreatment prevention. And given my background in economics and social work, as you just outlined, I think it would be most helpful for the committee if I talk a bit about more monetizing the benefits and the costs, if that would be all right. So first, let me put into perspective the incidence. We need to know what the size of the problem is before we attempt solutions. So as you may know, the national data collection systems and the national incidence studies, as well as national surveys, show that 1 to 10% of our child population are abused annually. That's a big range. But whether it's 750,000 children or 7.5 million children, one abused child is one child too many. So just to put this in perspective on the screen, imagine an aerial view of the following stadiums filled to capacity. Hopefully most of these are from your hometown. The Hubert Humphrey Metrodome, Dallas Cowboys Stadium, the Cotton Bowl, Yankee Stadium, Sanford Stadium, Nyland Stadium, Tiger, Century Links Field, and the Rose Bowl. There wasn't really a stadium from North Dakota that was large enough that I could include in this, sorry, Congressman. But imagine that instead of adult fans filling those seats, picture all of those seats now filled with children, abused children, almost 50% that are less than 4 years old. So hold those 9 stadiums packed to the gills, brimming with just children. That's what 753,000 looks like, and that's the lowest incidence number. So just to contextualize the problem, the consequences of child abuse and neglect, I think this committee has heard several times, but just because you mentioned that Devin and his parents, I just want to remind us that children that are abused and neglected have impaired brain development, 85% more likely to have that. And in stepwise fashion, very often have cognitive difficulties, impaired learning disorders, and then self-anesthetizing using substances, which leads to not doing so well in school and therefore school dropout, often teen pregnancy leading to juvenile delinquency. So this is not we talk about the associations, but there's a lot of cause-effect here. Most importantly, children that are abused are 6 times more likely to abuse their own children. I can only imagine what Devin's parents had gone through in their earlier lives. But child abuse also exacts a very high financial price. As you can see on this next slide, the Center for Disease Control's recent study monetizing the outcomes of the consequences of child abuse and neglect found that for every child abused in their lifetime, it'll cost $210,000 per victim. That's for those who survive abuse. For those who die, for every child abuse fatality, we as taxpayers spend $1.3 million per victim. So in 2012, inflation-adjusted dollars, that's $124 billion that we're throwing out the window just on the consequences of child abuse. But the monetary calculations cannot begin to place a value on the incalculable cost of lives lost, unseen scars of potentials quenched, spirits extinguished, and souls murdered. These human and financial costs are unacceptable and unsustainable, and they do represent an enormous financial burden on our taxpayers. The good news is that child abuse is largely preventable. Will we be able to prevent all child abuse? Probably not. But we have found net cost savings of child abuse prevention programs that are of high quality that return on average $3.50 for every dollar invested, up to $14.50 for every dollar invested. Here's an example of a program. It's entitled the Positive Parenting Program. And why I'm using this slide is that this particular program actually is cost neutral within a year, but it returns about $6 for every dollar invested. As you can see, in terms of the costs of reducing out-of-home placements and also, of course, CPS costs and other costs. So, for a relatively modest investment up front, we will not only break the intergenerational cycle of violence, we can reduce enormous economic tax burden on taxpayers immediately and long term. And where we are today in preventing child abuse is akin to where Congress was 70 years ago in exploring the use of antibiotics to kill infections. So when you look back, or your children or your grandchildren look back on this 10, 20, 50, 70 years from now, this is going to be that inflection point where we really go through this process of putting enough money up front to change that whole trajectory, not only for our at-risk kids and their families, but our great country at large. This National Commission is a right first step, and I really am excited about this commission helping all the states have an accessible blueprint for implementing a real child abuse prevention strategy. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms.